Today we're going to be covering the book of Judges. We're going to cover as many judges as we can, up until Samson, I believe, was where we'll stop. Samson is the 12th judge. There's 12 judges overall in the book of Judges, and there's even a 13th judge, which is Samuel. And so the first thing I want to do is go over the book, chapter 2, which actually gives us a big overview of the downward spiral, which is the book of Judges. And so the first part, it says, step 1 is Israel worships false gods. Second, Israel is sold to another people. Third is Israel is in distress. 4, God raises up a judge to save them. 5, Israel doesn't hearken to the judge. 6 is repeat. So once again, Israel worships false gods. Israel is sold to another people. Israel's in distress. God raises up a judge to save them. Israel doesn't hearken to the judge. Repeat. So this process, or this horrible spiral, occurs 12 times because the children of Israel are not heeding to the voice of the Lord. They keep falling into the same mistakes that their children and their children's children have made. They're not learning from their mistakes. This is about the most beautiful case and the ugliest case in the Bible, because you see how patient the Lord is. So that's the beauty. He's willing to send out a judge 12 different times to try to take care of them and bring them back to their way, because they're calling out in distress and saying, Lord, we've erred from our way. We want to come back. And God is merciful enough to be patient with them and to give them another judge to save them. So in that sense, a judge is not somebody with a powdered wig that sentences somebody to something. They are somebody that is like a hero. What I want you to think about when you hear the word judge is I want you to think about a damsel in distress, which in this case, that would be the children of Israel. And I want you to think about the hero is the judge. This is the guy that goes out there and he saves that damsel in distress. And this is what a judge truly is. I think the translation is not exactly the way that we think about it. But what they do that is in a judgely manner is that they do judge God's people. They do intercess for God for them. Okay. And so the first part I want to talk about is why would God allow conquering foes to rise up and take out Israel? Why would God allow this to happen? In Judges chapter 3, verses 1, we're going to read, Judges chapter 3, we're going to read a handful of verses here. Now these are the nations which the Lord left to prove Israel by them, even as many of Israel as had not known all the wars of Canaan. Only that the generations of the children of Israel might know, to teach them war, at the least such as before knew nothing thereof. Namely, 5 lords of the Philistines, and all the Canaanites, and Sidonians, and the Hivites that dwelt in Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal-Hermon unto the entering in of Hamath. And they were to prove Israel by them, to know whether they would hearken unto the commandments of the Lord, which he commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. And something that's really frustrating about this is that this could have all been prevented if they would have just avoided this one sin here. It's not just one sin, it's a massive sin. And so what happened here is that 7 out of 12 of the children of Israel didn't drive out the inhabitants of the land. Or in the case of Dan, they were forced out. And the list of the tribes that didn't drive them out, it was Benjamin, Manasseh, Ephraim, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali, Dan, and once again, Dan, the Amorites forced the children of Dan into the mountains. So 7 out of 12 of the children of Israel, the people that were supposed to inherit that promise that was promised to Abraham, then to Isaac, then to Jacob, who was Israel. And so 7 out of 12 did not take their inheritance. And so just as a little rewind to get us back into the mindset of that, Moses took the children of Israel out of Egypt. And then he got them all the way up onto the east side of the Jordan River, but he was not allowed to take them into that location. That was after wandering in the wilderness for 40 years until all the men that had committed the sin had died. So that's a whole other case by itself right there. But so Moses was not allowed to go in. But Joshua, one of the spies that said, he was one of the 12 spies, that was, one of each tribe. There's one spy from each of the tribes that was sent into the land, into the promised land. And they said, I want you to do is spy out the land and come back. And if it's, and I want you to let us know if it's worth going into this land of Canaan. And so Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh decided that it was okay. Joshua was of the tribe of Judah, and Caleb, I believe he was of the tribe of Ephraim. So these two were the two that were faithful, so they were the ones that were allowed to go into that land. And so Joshua is the ruler. He's the person who's going to deliver them and allow the children of Israel to gain on that promise that God has promised to Abraham, Isaac, and now to Jacob or Israel. And so in that process, all throughout Joshua, he takes out a total of 31 kings. Throughout all his life, he's just conquering and conquering and conquering. God gives him a little bit of rest at the end of his life, and he lived to be 110 years old. So right off the bat, transitioning into Judges, is that Joshua has now died. And all the elders that outlived Joshua, they also have died. And so now that their influence is out of the way, the children of Israel are now going to start sinning. They're going to start going the wrong way. And what does this remind you of? This kind of reminds you of a father when they're not home, or if they died, or if they're out of the picture. And the son or the daughter, they expect them to just do all the right things, to have no guidance, and to just know exactly, for a man, how to figure out how to be a man, even with the father outside of the picture. That's a tough thing to do, isn't it? And so they didn't drive the inhabitants out of the land. And then the second part of this sin is that they took daughters of the land and gave their daughters to be their sons. And so they gave in to those people. They started intermingling with them. And I said gave their daughters to be their sons. I meant to say that they gave their daughters to their sons. And so they were giving in to those people, and they were intermingling, and it was turning into where there's half breeds of people. They were half of that tribe, half of the other. And isn't that complicated now? Now those people have a little bit of your blood, and you're commanded that you need to clean them out. That's what Joshua told them. He says, "Here's your inheritance. Here's your inheritance, Ephraim. Here's your inheritance, Judah. Here's your inheritance, Simeon." And he went through and he gave them all their inheritance and said, "That's your land. That's your land, Manasseh. That's your land." And they didn't take it. Only 5 out of 12 were willing to take that land. They were the ones that were faithful and took them and actually took the land that was inherited to them. And another one of their sins was that they served their gods. Judges chapter 3, verses 5 through 7. "And the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, Hittites, and Amorites, and Perizzites, and Hivites, and Jebusites, and they took their daughters to be their wives, and gave their daughters to their sons, and served their gods. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and forgot the Lord their God, and served Balaam and the groves." So, who were the judges? There was 12 total, and 4 of them actually take up most of the book of Judges as well, just as a little side note. The first of these judges was Othniel. He was mentioned in Judges chapter 3, verses 5 through 11. He was Caleb's younger brother. So there was Caleb and Joshua. Remember, those were the 2 faithful spies. And he smote Kirjath-Sepher and married his brother's daughter. So that's a little weird, but that's how it was back in those times. Joshua chapter 15, verses 16 through 17, "And Caleb said, He that smiteth Kirjath-Sepher and taketh it, to him will I give Ashsa my daughter to wife. And Othniel the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, took it, and he gave him Ashsa his daughter to wife." So that's the first of the kings. There's not a lot that's mentioned about him, but what we do know is that based off Judges chapter 2, that even if it doesn't say all the exact details, there was still that cyclical nature that I mentioned earlier. It was the fact that Israel worshiped false gods, Israel sold to another people, Israel's in distress, God raises up a judge, in this case it was Othniel, Israel didn't hearken to him, and repeat. Even though some of these, they don't give all the verses, I believe that was the case for every single one of these. The next one, this is my favorite of the judges, is Ehud. Judges chapter 3, verses 12 through 30, and I'll just sum this up for you. So what happened is, a hero raised up in the land. His name was Ehud. And the children of Israel, they'd been sold into the hand of Eglon. Eglon was this fat man who had been oppressing them for many, many, many years. That's all for some of their children. That's all they knew. When you're being oppressed for 18 years, you just don't even know better. I believe it's exactly 18 years. It was approximately 20 years of how long Eglund was ruling. And so Ehud decides what he's going to do is he's going to have some trickery. He's going to go in unto the king, and he's going to say, I have a gift of the Lord to thee. And so what happens is as Eglund says, silence, and he tells all his servants to go out of the room. And so they left the room, and now it's just Ehud and Eglund. So we have the hero and the fat king who's oppressing them. So you can imagine what's going to happen next. So what happens is Ehud was a left-handed man. And on here it probably looks like I'm a right-handed man, but I'm raising my left hand. And it says that he reached over onto his right thigh and stabbed him with a knife. And I imagine, I don't know if that was the tradition back then, but I imagine there was some sort of right-handed shake, and that was the way that a left-handed man could be so deceiving. So he would be shaking with his right hand and reach over into his right thigh with his left arm, and then he stabbed him. And it says he stabbed him into his fat belly all the way, and so the haft of the blade was stuck in his belly, and he was unable to pull it out. And it says specifically the dirt fell out. So that's mean like the poop, the intestines, the nastiness that's inside this fat king was spilling out. And so what does Ehud do after he has killed their king? He walks out, opens the doors, locks them behind him, and his servants go, well, that was weird. He just walked right out. And what's going on here? And so they're sitting there, and they're like, they didn't realize that he had locked the door, and they're sitting there, is he okay? Is he doing well? Is he doing well in his summer chamber? Is he okay? And they're like, okay, it's been long enough. We better go check on him. So they go in and they check on him, and they find that their king is dead. That Ehud had delivered them away from their oppressor Eglund. The next judge is Shamgar, Judges chapter 3. Verses 31. I'm going to go ahead and open up my Bible there because I didn't write the verse down on here. Judges chapter 3, verses 31. And feel free also to read along. I think that it's a great way to add memory of where you are in the Bible. Practice flipping through the pages. Judges 3, verse 11. And it says, let me see here. Judges 3, verse 31, sorry about that. And after him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, which slew of the Philistines 600 men with an ox goad, and he also delivered Israel. So an ox goad was a piece of farming equipment. That was an ox goad. It was something where you would keep the goats going and move them along, and he used that to kill, it says here, 600 men with an ox goad. These were no just ordinary deliverers or heroes. These were fantastic heroes. And that's, if there's one thing you can take away from this lesson, is that these judges were just epic individuals. Absolutely epic. The next one is going to be Deborah. So look at this. We have our first woman judge, the only woman judge, and she is just fantastic. For many people, this is their absolute favorite judge, and there's a good reason why. So she was married to a man named Lapidoth, and she was a prophetess. A prophetess means somebody that is an inspired woman, by implication a poetess, or by association a prophet's wife. So it could have either been that she was foretelling things, or that Lapidoth really was the prophet. I personally believe that she was the inspired individual that was prophesying of things to come. And based off the story, when you read through there, it appears more like she's the prophet, that she was able to foretell what was going on. But it's that word prophetess is a kind of a broader term, so it's difficult to know by the translation. But based off the context, that's generally the direction that I would want to see it as. And so what happens is, after Ehud died, they were sold into Jabin, king of Canaan of Hatzor. And this is just a reminder, this is a different Jabin from the previous Hatzor, and he had a captain named Sisera who oppressed them for 20 years. And I want that to sink in. 20 years of being oppressed by this Jabin, the king of Hatzor. And this is, they even mentioned he's the king of Canaan. And many times they refer to the promised land as Canaan, or much of the promised land as Canaan. And so, like, for example, I don't know if you've heard the song, I will leave this land of bondage to and then it refers to Canaan. I'm forgetting the words for a brief moment, but it talks. There's many different songs about going into the promised land, the land of Canaan, and they call this man the king of Canaan. This was no easy feat to take out the king of Canaan. And just remember, the captain, not the king, his name is Sisera. This is the main target. This is the person that is the cornerstone of this kingdom. He's the person who runs the army. And so Deborah, what she does is she was told by God to have Barak, well, I believe she was told by God. Some people might argue that Lapidoth told her, but I personally believe it was her. Was told by God to have Barak and 10,000 people to go over where Sisera was, and God would deliver them. So God's saying, they're right over there, they're by this river, and this is what I want you to do. I want you to send these people, and you are going to take out Sisera. This is where they're encamped. And so God gave them this essential detail of where he was located. And so, sure enough, she goes up to Barak and she says, what I want you to do, Barak, is I want you to do is take 10,000 people and go to the river, I believe it's the river Kishon, to go get Sisera. And sure enough, Barak goes, well, that's quite the task, right? And so he says, if you don't go with me, I won't go. But if you go with me, Deborah, I'll go. And so it just shows so much about this very, very charismatic woman, this woman that could move people, this woman that was a leader for God. And so she decides that she's going to go with him. She goes, sure enough, I'll come with you. And then she also explains that the Lord would deliver Sisera into the hand of a woman. So sure enough, Barak and Deborah go through, and Barak leads the 10,000 people, and they take out Sisera's army. And they had iron chariots. This was a key resource in order to win many, many battles. And so they took out these chariots. They took out the people that were by the river, under the captain Sisera. They killed everybody, but their captain escaped. So Sisera is now on the run, and now he goes into an allied territory. He goes in, and in this allied territory to the Jabin. So this allied territory was to Jabin, not to obviously the children of Israel. And sure enough, he goes into the worst house possible. So imagine your captain coming out of war, and now you go into this house, you're like, oh, it's an allied territory, this is good, they'll take care of me, surely they'll take care of me. But sure enough, he came into Jael, who deceives Sisera, and she invites him in and says, come on in, I'll take care of you. I know, I can see that you're wearied, you're tired. And then she covered him. She's like, and he's like, just give me something to drink. And then she gave him some milk and was taking care of him. And then he said, what I want you to do is stand by the door. And if somebody comes by, say that I went that way. Don't say that I'm in here. And so, and sure enough, she's just like, oh, of course, I got you. I'll take care of you. No worries. So then, sure enough, Sisera falls asleep. And here's the most gruesome part. You may have thought that Ehud stabbing Eglon and the dirt falling out was nasty. But sure enough, the next step is that Jael, even nastier than this, she takes a tent spike and she drives it through the temple of this man. She drives it through the temple of Sisera, the captain of the king of Hatzor, Jabin. And so she drives it not only just through his temples, but she drives it into the ground. She's just like, I'm not only am I going to kill you, I'm going to really, really kill you. And so that was Deborah. That was their deliverer. Now, the next of these deliverers is mentioned in Judges chapter 6 through 8, and I'm going to sum this up just because we don't have the time to go through all these different chapters. And so what had occurred is the Midianites and Amalekites were the people that God sold them into. They had taken over the land, and the children of these people, of the Amalekites and the Midianites, were like grasshoppers in multitude. And the children of Israel, they were terrified. So they went into the mountains, they went into the caves, they went into the strongholds, they went anywhere where they could hide away and get away from these people. And not only that, they left them no sustenance. These enemies, the Amalekites and Midianites, left the Israelites nothing to work with. No more food, nothing. And so they're hiding away, starving away. They're in a bad state. So God then sends a prophet to tell all the people. So he goes and he says, fear not, I'm your deliverer. I'm going to come in and help you out. And so this prophet is prophesying that there will be a deliverer for the people, and he's telling them to not fear. And so after this prophet, now an angel then appears to Gideon, the son of Joash, and said, the Lord is with thee, thou mighty men of valor. And get this, an angel appearing to Gideon. So first Gideon, when he sees this angel, he's doubting. He's just like, I don't know about this. And so what he does is he wants to seek a sign, and he says, angel, I want you to stay. I'm going to bring you an offering. And he comes back with a goat meat, bread, and broth. He then sets this offering on a rock, and then he pours the broth over it. So imagine a rock, you have bread, goat's meat, and then you put broth over it. And I want you to try to predict what's going to happen next. You're in the midst of an angel, you have this offering, and you've poured broth over it. What do you think is going to happen? Is that broth lighter fluid? Is it going to catch fire? Sure enough, it does. And so this angel takes its staff and it touches it, and then it disappears. And sure enough, that rock where that bread and the goat's meat and the broth, which clearly was lighter fluid, no, I'm just kidding, and it lights up into fire. An absolute miracle of the Lord. And so this was quite the sign. Then the Lord tells Gideon to take down the altars of Baal. He's like, now I want you to act on it. And so what he does is he uses the previous altar as fuel to burn down a calf sacrifice for the Lord. So he gets 10 people to go with him, and sure enough, he goes in the night with his 10 servants, and he comes in and he takes down the altar of Baal. And what I want you to remember is that the children of Israel, they had fallen into false gods. Every time that a judge needed to save them ways, because they had fallen into these false gods, and that's what allowed them to be sold to another people. And so by him taking down Baal, by him taking down this altar, that was problematic. That was going to make the people very, very upset. And so Gideon does this. He burns down their altar, and then he hides away. He goes back to his dad's house, and the people said, I bet it was that Gideon. I know that Gideon would do this sort of thing. So they go to Joash, and then Joash comes out to them, and he says, and the people said, bring out Gideon. We want to kill him. We're going to take his life. And then he tells him, he says, Joash comes out, and he's calm, cool, and collected, and he tells him, he says, let Baal protect himself. Let Baal decide if he wants Gideon to die. You don't need to put a hand on him. If this is a true God, then your gods or your God can take him out. You don't even need to fight for him. And the people are like, well, that's weird. We thought we would have had to protect this God. But God can protect himself. And so now, after Joash has saved him, now Gideon is going to ask for the first sign of deliverance. And so the first thing he asks, he says to this angel, he says, if there's dew on the wool and on the ground, or so he just says to the Lord, he's seeking for a sign. He says, Lord, I want you to give me a sign. Kind of like that one song, The Lord Give Me a Sign. I don't know if you've heard it. It's like a rap song. It's kind of interesting. He says, what I want you to do, Lord, if you're going to deliver me, if there's dew on the wool and on the ground, if there's dew on the wool and the ground is dry, then I know you'll deliver me. And sure enough, he leaves out some wool on the ground, and he goes to sleep, comes back in the morning, and he looks, and there's dew on the wool, and the ground is dry. And then next, he says, I want the opposite to occur. He goes out, puts the wool out, goes to sleep, wakes up, and sure enough, if there's dew on the ground and the wool is dry, then I know you've delivered me. And sure enough, that occurred. That there was dew on the ground and the wool was completely dry. It had defied physics. It had defied nature here. And so since there was too many Midianites, there were so many people to go and fight. Remember, they were like the grasshoppers in multitude. This was an absolutely terrifying foe for them to try to take out here. And so the Lord said, okay, what I want you to do, you're not going to take all the army. What I want you to do is you're going to take the people with you that go down, and I want you to take all the people of war and have them drink. You're going to drink from this water. And sure enough, the ones that would take their hands down in the water and go like this, they were not the ones that he was to choose. But instead, the ones that would get down and drink that water like a dog, putting their face right down in there in that water, that was the ones that he was going to use. And only 300 of those men he was going to be using. So sure enough, God had this awesome plan to guide them out. And God, what he told them to do is he said, what I want you to do is I want you to take each of these men, and I want you to take a torch in one hand and a trumpet in the other. And so on that torch, there's going to be a pitcher on top of it. And so you have your trumpet, you've got your torch with a pitcher on top, and you're going to go out and you're going to circle the encampment of these Midianites and Amalekites. And all at once, during the night, is you're going to break that pitcher, raise your torch, blow your trumpet, and then yell out, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon." This must have been absolutely terrifying to the people. Absolutely terrifying. And in the psychological warfare, I mean, can you get over that? They were yelling out in the night, trying to terrify them. And the next part, it says, so let's just go ahead and read here. Judges chapter 7, verse 22. And the 300 blew the trumpets, and the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow, even throughout all the host. And the host fled to Beth Shittah and Zeraroth, and to the border of Abil-Maholah, unto Tabith. And the men of Israel gathered themselves together out of Naphtali, and out of Asher, and out of all Manasseh, and pursued after the Midianites. And then, and so sure enough, the people, they started to, let's keep reading here. Actually, Judges chapter 8, verse 22. Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, "Rule thou over us, both thou and thy son's son also." So that's hopping too far ahead. So what had happened is, after they'd done this, all the people in the encampment, they were terrified, and they started to kill each other out of just complete confusion. And so while they're killing themselves, then those 300 men came in and they finished the job, and that was their deliverer, and they saved them out. And the people were so impressed that in Judges chapter 8, verse 22 through 23, it's going to talk about how the people, they said they wanted him to be their king, not just a judge. They wanted to elevate him to the next level. But if you remember, there's actually a detail that I want you to understand, is that the judges, they were simply to do the will of God, and God would be their king. They didn't need a physical king because God was their king. And this was the perfect system. As long as they could have faith in the Lord, they did not need a king. Judges chapter 8, verse 22. Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, "Rule thou over us, both thou and thy son's son also, for thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian." And Gideon said unto them, "I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you." And so Gideon has this beautiful response. He says, "I'm not going to rule after you. I won't do this." And but Gideon, he still falls short. And what he does is, after this happened, he decides, he says, "What I want you to do is all the prey that you've killed, I want you to go out, and I want you, and since these people, they're Ishmaelites, so a lot of them had golden earrings. And so he said, go out, and I want you to collect these golden earrings, and I will make an image, an ephod for you." And so sure enough, he makes this image. He puts it in the center of the town, and the people, they start to worship the image. So it's like, Gideon, could you not get it right? And what you'll notice here is that these judges, that and it's just going to get worse. You know, by the time we get to Samson, you'll really know what I mean by this, especially when I talk about Jephthah, is the fact that these judges were not a moral compass. They were simply a deliverer for God. They were simply somebody who would get the children of Israel out of their troubles, out of their strife, and into the right way. They were never intended to be a king, and they were they were especially never meant to be a person as their moral compass. God is their moral compass. Now the next judge. Okay, so now they've already fell back again. Judges 8, verse 33, it says, "And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that your children of Israel turned again and went a-whoring after Balaam, and made Baal-berith their god." Now the next one is Tola. Judges chapter 10, verse 1, "And after Abimelech there arose to defend Israel Tola, the son of Puah, the son of Dodo, a man of Issachar, and he dwelt in Shemir in Mount Ephraim. And he judged Israel 23 years, and died, and was buried in Shemir." Sure enough, just that. Only 2 verses dedicated to Tola, but we know that those all the steps of the judge mentioned in Judges chapter 2 were definitely occurred, if the Bible is true. Jair, Judges chapter 10, verse 3 through 5. "And after him arose Jair, a Gileadite, and judged Israel 22 years, and had 30 sons that rode on 30 ass colts, and they had 30 cities, which are called Havoth Jair unto this day, which are the land of Gilead. And Jair died and was buried in Kamon." Okay, and so now we're on to actually that's a really great stopping point, because I actually Do I want to go one more? Yeah, we're going to stop there. I'm going to make my own lesson and make that a separate lesson about Jephthah. That's one that it takes a bit longer to stop with. We're at 29 minutes here, nearly 30 minutes. So it seems like a really great stopping point. I never want to end any lesson without going over the plan of salvation, which is to hear, believe, repent of our sins, confess that Jesus Christ is Son of the living God. And if there's a couple of takeaways that I want you to take away from this, is that cyclical nature. And I'm going to read it one more time just as a review for you. Step 1, Israel worships false gods. Step 2, they're sold to another people. 3, Israel's in distress, saying, God, I can't believe that we've done this. Take us back. 4, raises up a judge to save them. 5, Israel doesn't hearken to the judge. And repeat. And this is going to happen 12 times in the book of Judges. And another thing is that as Gideon clearly was showing them, or as we can clearly learn from Gideon, is that these judges were not a moral compass. This was not somebody that we're supposed to see their actions and say, I want to follow after that person. They were a deliverer. They were a hero and nothing more. They were a tool or a vessel for God, for his will to be established. And I hope that you can take those couple little lessons with you and take care. God bless.